Elizabeth. That was beautiful. Thank you. Well, good morning again. So as Ron introduced me, I'm Mariela Janelle Gonzalez, and I have been doing hospital chaplaincy for about 6 years now. I started with an internship and then moved on to residency and then started the chaplain education program. And so I talk a lot. I will try to be briefer today than I am in our lectures and group meetings. I always think I only have a little bit to say, but as I get going and I'm like, oh, here we go, okay. And I'm gonna just start with my feelings like we often do in chaplaincy and chaplain education. You wanna sit and see what's going on in yourself. I feel a little bit of the jitters right now. This is my home church and my people, and yet I'm coming up here knowing that it is an honor and a responsibility to be here with all of you. I see that it's lovely outside, so maybe I'm a little anxious to get going. I just feel the flutters. So I see your faces and I am glad to be here with you too. So that's what I feel right now.
We're glad you're here too.
Thank you. Oh, we're calling out now, right? So maybe just, let's just take a moment together and just, we heard beautiful music. We've heard some words that maybe stirred up feelings. We maybe have plans for the Labor Day weekend. Just take a moment, take a breath, see what you're feeling inside, because we're gonna tell some stories today. All right. So when I started chaplaincy, I didn't think I knew what I was doing. And I wanted to be clever with the patients and have answers and help them all I could. But I found that I was meeting a lot of people who there wasn't anything to do except to hear them and accept what they were saying. So a couple stories came to mind as I prepared today. One was from a man, and he was nervous about surgery. And he asked me, well, what can you do? And, well, tell me how you're feeling. Tell me about what's going on. What's making you scared? Like, what's been going on for you? And I listened to him. And then, like my supervisor at the time had taught me, she said, if you sense that a person is afraid or sad, you want to respond to that feeling with a intervention. So sadness, the intervention is, how can I support you? And fear, the intervention is, how can I offer you some reassurance? So new chaplain that I was at the time, I asked him, how can I offer some reassurance? And then he responded with the brilliant answer of, I don't know. So I started making suggestions, and one of them was, I could say a prayer with you. And being an agnostic atheist, I was actually relieved when he said, well, I am agnostic and I don't really pray, but you can pray if you want to. I said, well, how about we just take some deep breaths of meditation together? And so I led him in like a 4-square breathing of breathing in and holding and breathing out. And we did that together for a short time. And he said, thank you, chaplain. I feel a little better now. I'm not as nervous about my surgery. And that's when it was like, and it happens a lot oftentimes, of do I say you're welcome? It feels so small and so big at the same time to say, you're welcome, I've done something for you. But how else do I respond? Sometimes I say, thank you for sharing your story with me. It was an honor. Sometimes I just say, okay, or nothing at all, depending on the situation. Another story also of kind of a breathing has come to mind. There was a person in her 80s suspected of COVID who came into the hospital in late March of 2020. And her children hadn't been able to visit her when she was in a nursing home. Because we didn't have the visitor policy set up, they allowed the children to come into their mother's room with PPE and say goodbye one by one. And then I met them as they were walking out, and one of them reached out to hug me. And it was, of course, the time when we were thinking 6 feet apart, social distancing. And she touched my arm. And I had to decide, is that okay right now? Can I make this human connection, or what's the risk? And I think that's a question a lot of us were asking through the years. And then they asked me to go to their mother's room and to pray for her. And because I didn't want to take the risk of going in rooms when I didn't need to, when I knew I might be seeing other critical patients, I stood outside the window and stood near the glass so she could see me. And I said a prayer while she struggled to breathe. But I think that she knew that I was there, and when the nurse went in the room, she had that human connection. In addition to just direct care and chaplaincy, I've been working with students who have been providing the care, and they come with their own anxieties when meeting patients and uncertainties, and so, like me, think, I want to be the best chaplain. I want to have the right word to say and help someone and do something. And it's hard because they're learning to do less. Because we can't grab the scalpel. We can't stop the stopping of the heart. We can't restart a heart. We are often called in when death is imminent and there's nothing else to do. And we have to be there and accept it and welcome all the feelings. And to do that, the person who's receiving care first welcomes us, and that's the mutual welcome. So I sit with students after they've been in these situations. One student provided a service for parents who had lost their baby. And it was touching for the group of their own pregnancy loss, because we had students in that group who had experienced the same thing, and the empathy was stirred. I had a student with anxiety who had so much tenderness from the death of his father that he was trying to say something and do something when he was provided for hospice patients. And really, he just needed to touch his own tenderness and be there with compassion. And he tried to learn to do that. And I think in this room, in this group, we all have stories that intersect with each other and different ways of being and different ways of experiencing. And we feel what we feel while also making space for the other person. If they can welcome our care, we can welcome their feelings. It's not always easy with a lot of different personalities, though. In the group, and in a congregation, we have different personalities that spark off of each other. Sometimes it's full of grace and support, but sometimes it's disconnecting and confusing. And that's okay too. Even in that, how do we welcome each other and welcome all the complexities of being together? Maybe welcome for these feelings and stories isn't the first word that comes to mind. But I was talking with Andrea a few weeks ago, and she knew that I was going to be speaking this morning, and she invited me to share what I've been up to in spiritual care work. I said, what was the theme again for September? And when she said welcome, I felt a flutter in my heart that this might fit. I've been learning these lessons of welcome and chaplaincy. And like Ron said, we're exploring how to welcome feelings and stories. So let's consider the relationship between acceptance and spiritual care. Like I said, you're welcome seems like a strange thing to say when someone says thank you when they've experienced maybe the worst day of their life. And why do we say it? There's this openness to giving. And it's a weird kind of mix between being the host and being the guest, which is interesting in the etymology of welcome. Comes from a word relating to hospitality. And hospital and hospitality comes from a word meaning hospice, which means both host and guest. So there's like a both and. And when I walk into a patient's room, I am representing the hospital. So I have welcomed them into my space, the space that I'm there every day. And yet they are welcoming me into their room, into their space that they've made while they're there, to hear their feelings and their story. And then I try to bring welcome by giving acceptance, attention, and love. I was honored when a student said to me as we were closing our group, we were kind of processing and reflecting like chaplains do. We do a lot of reflecting on feelings. And she said, "I'm so grateful for this space because you've made me know that all my feelings are welcome." Now, they aren't often welcomed by the person who's feeling them. We think about the all ages stories when sadness is at your door. It might not be easy to welcome sadness, but sometimes you just sit with it and let it be because that's the way it is. The welcome is allowed to be much more complicated for those feelings. It's okay to want things to be better. It's okay to be angry about injustice. It's a paradoxical relationship with radical acceptance, but not a contentious one. So radical acceptance is the practice of staying in the reality of what is, acknowledging it fully, but it doesn't mean you have to be happy about it. You can radically accept your uncomfortable feelings too. It's Labor Day tomorrow, and we heard a piece from Steve and from Ron about labor, about the work that people have done, which isn't always fun times. Sometimes it's just day in and day out and your body starts to hurt. And maybe you accept it because it's the reality, and at the same time you could want working conditions to be better, for wages to be fairer, equal pay for equal work, those kinds of things. We are still in a struggle for injustice. In the piece that Ron read from Martin Luther King Jr., MLK, he was an advocate for workers' rights and an advocate for justice. And he notes that we are caught up in a network of mutuality. So all the feelings that someone is feeling, that's part of your story too, because we are an interconnected web of humanity. I think there's a principle in UU about an interconnected web. Although there are things that are unacceptable, we can meet each person with love and acceptance in their personhood. Another UU principle, the inherent worth and dignity of everyone. I'm trying to check the time because I don't know how long I've been. What do we got? I don't see the clock behind the screen. 11:21? All right. So we don't have enough time to go into a full philosophical unpacking of why do inherently worthy, good humans do bad things, or why do bad things happen to good people? But I do want to share a few ideas from internal family systems. So this is a psychological theory by Richard Schwartz, and he talks about people have parts. And he discovered this idea, kind of came up with this framework, working with patients who have, can't lean on the lectern apparently, patients who have bulimia. And the people would use this language of, well, one part says eat, 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 and one part says, oh, you're so bad, you ate so much, and then you purge. And so he realized that they were talking about parts of themselves as if they had entire different personalities. And he realized that those parts were not malicious, but they were protective of the person, something that they were afraid of. And we have parts too. we do the same thing. Part of me wanted to come to church today, but part of me wanted to stay in bed. And that's okay. These parts want different things. And protective parts, I think that they are an amalgamation of little hurts across time and history, and that's why good people end up doing bad things or do things that make people feel bad, and it gets complicated. What we learn from our parts is a lot of times that they come into these protective roles that are harmful or cause hurt or do something that's it seems unthinkable and unjust. I think one way to think about it that has given me more compassion is to think of these parts as precious, misaligned, immature children who are throwing tantrums or just wanting a little bit too much treats. And when you think about a baby or a child who is throwing stuff, is yelling, is mad, hates you maybe if you're the parent, you maybe have a sense of compassion for them, and it can accept that maybe there are hurt people who hurt people, as the phrase goes. So the way to meet parts is an idea that comes from IFS, and it's the idea that each of us has an innate self with qualities such as calm, compassion, courage, and curiosity, and that yourself can welcome your parts and be curious about where their feelings came from. Yourself stops fighting with parts and cares for them. And it's kind of an easy way to do that. It's like we started in the beginning and just said, what am I feeling right now? What am I feeling in my body? What's going on with my parts? And listening. I think that welcome is a key for care and justice. Let's think about it again. Welcome as acceptance, attention, and love. Acceptance for stories, feelings, curiosity about where the hurtful parts come from, where the pained parts come from, where the fearful parts come from. And attention to caring for ourselves and another in the midst of that. Engaging mutual hospitality of guest and host. You welcome me to hear from you, and I welcome your story and your feelings. I welcome the feelings in myself that get stirred up, and I make a decision to lean into them or to hold them back and save them for my therapist. We stay with, to attend to, give attention to what feels hard. Someone said, and I don't remember the quote, that attention is like love because we often don't get enough attention, and when we feel it, it feels like love. Something like that. That might be a paraphrase. Love meets difficult things, and love is powerful enough. Love is enough, but it's not all you need. So I felt a special welcome in this congregation when my wife and I hosted our wedding a little 5 years ago. We were hosting, and yet we were the ones who owe our gratitude. I was grateful for this community who celebrated with me, and I was grateful to invite you to celebrate. I know not everyone was part of this congregation at the time, but those of you who were, I see some of your faces today, and I'm so glad to see you again. That was a mutual welcome. We don't need to be chaplains, but we can care for one another. Though a quick plug, if you do want to become a chaplain, feel free to talk to me and I'll see if I can find a CPE group for you. In love, we welcome each other's full humanity, all the feelings and stories. We feel all our feelings and we can just be with them. It's like taking a breath. And we'll have a chance to practice that, to be with each other in our sharing of joys and concerns, and also in our centering and meditation. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you just a little more before we end.